Real Story with Senior News Editor for the Real News Network, Paul Jay.
Last week, the Battle of Basra came to a pause when a deal brokered by Iran included Muqtada al-Sadr, the inspirational leader of the Mahdi army, calling on the militias to withdraw. But in the past few days, Iraq government forces, supported by U.S. troops and air power, have turned their guns on Sadr city. This is a section of Baghdad where close to 3 million impoverished Shia live. It's a stronghold of support for al-Sadr and the Mahdi army. In the recent fighting, hundreds of people have been killed, including many civilians. Saturday, in what could be a real defining moment of the U.S. occupation in Iraq, Muqtada al-Sadr, through a spokesman, issued a stern warning.
وإن لم ترعوا ولم تقبح جماحها وجماح الميليشيات المندسة فيها فسنعلنها حربا مفتوحة حتى التحرير.
The reason for al-Sadr's move has been reported by the Real News. The people of Sadr city are outraged that their communication with the rest of Baghdad is being cut off. Civilians are being killed and the giant slums turned into a gulag.
أنا أيد رسالة السيد مقتدى لأنه هسه الحكومة العراقية والجيش الأمريكي دمر مدينة الصدر التدمير، وأن ما دمروا الشعب العراقي كافة. أخواننا بالبصرة، أخواننا بمدينة الصدر.
ليش هيك؟ والطيارات والصواريخ بتولونا بالصواريخ، كسروا بيوتنا، حلال جهالة، أولادي كل من ومرته وجهالة.
A Sadr-led Shia uprising against the U.S. occupation could be the nightmare scenario U.S. military leaders have been afraid of. A perfect storm made up of a united front of Shia and Sunni fighters against the U.S. occupation and the Iraqi government. At center stage, Muqtada al-Sadr. American leaders and media have called him a thug, a terrorist, Iranian-backed one day and an Iraqi nationalist the next. But millions of Iraqis have come to believe his is the loudest voice of the impoverished masses who never shared in the oil wealth of Iraq. The U.S. is hoping al-Sadr will make a deal. When we return, we talk to Pepe Escobar and Patrick Colburn and try to answer the question, who is Muqtada al-Sadr? I'm joined now by Pepe Escobar, foreign correspondent and analyst for the Real News Network. Who is Muqtada al-Sadr?
He's a multifaceted character. He's an incredibly complex character. But one thing we know, the future of the American occupation in Iraq is in his hands. Both Muqtada's father and father-in-law, they were killed by the Saddam regime. As for the other powerful family in Iraq, the Al-Hakim family, during Saddam they were in exile in Iran. So we have to keep this in mind all the time. The battle for power in Iraq is not only politics, it's a family war and it's a class war as well. What you're about to see is Muqtada in his own words. This is a very, very rare interview. Dick Cheney won't agree, but make no mistake about how Muqtada and his millions of downtrodden followers see the American occupation.
والشيء الثاني الأكثر أنه تأثير أمريكا سلبي أكثر من تأثير، فهي ليست بتحرير وإنما احتلال. أنا أسميه احتلال. أنا كنت أقول في السابق، قلتها في السنين السابقة، أنه ذهب الشيطان الأصغر وجاء الشيطان الأكبر.
But what is the strategic goal of Muqtada and his Mahdi army? Make no mistake, resistance followed by liberation.
أي مكان وجد به احتلال أوتوماتيكيا يوجد به شنو؟ مقاومة، وإن شاء الله ستندحر كما اندحرت في فيتنام إن شاء الله.
But resistance does not mean only the Mahdi army. It means Shiites and Sunnis working together.
حتى على تحرير العراق مع بعض المقومات الأخرى إن شاء الله شيئا فشيئا. أنا قريب عقائديا من الشيعة طبعا، لكني قريبا سياسيا من السنة وقرارات.
Very important. Muqtada wants a unified Iraq, no partition.
هناك وإنما شنو خطط لتقسيم العراق، لتقسيم المقسم لو صح التعبير. يجب على التيار الصدري أن يقف ضد هذا التقسيم.
Let the Bush administration fool no one. Muqtada is not an Iranian agent. Take a look. This is how he refers to a meeting he had with the Iranian supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei.
أخبرته أن علاقتنا وامتدادنا واحد عقائديا، إلا أنه الامتداد السياسي والعسكري لن أكون امتدادا لكم، وهناك سلبيات تقوم بها الجمهورية في العراق.
So Muqtada al-Sadr is a far more complicated man than we're hearing in the American media.
Oh yes, he is. And to separate the man from the myth, I spoke to Patrick Colburn. Patrick is the Middle East correspondent for the London Independent, and he just wrote a fascinating book about Muqtada. Patrick, first question. Tell me about Muqtada the man. What kind of man is he? What forged his character?
His character, I think, was formed by the fact that his father and two brothers were assassinated in 1999. Almost all his male relatives were killed by Saddam. So he's really somebody who's survived a series of massacres under Saddam Hussein.
Is he a thinking man?
Oh yes, I think so. You know, there's a journalistic cliche that Muqtada is the renegade cleric, the maverick cleric, the firebrand cleric, or alternatively that somehow he's very stupid but has become the leader of this mass movement. I think these are all myths. He grew up in a very political atmosphere as a lieutenant of his father, Mohammed Sadiq al-Sadr, who created the Sadrist mass movement originally in the 1990s. And he ran his father's office, he ran his father's magazine. So he's very streetwise. He was brought up in a very political atmosphere, and he had much more knowledge of Iraqi society at the bottom and how its politics works than most people in the present government, the present Iraqi government, who have been in exile for 10, 20 or 30 years.
What do you make of recent observations by Petraeus and Crocker that they might consider sitting down and talking to al-Sadr?
Well, I think that this is a bit of propaganda. The Americans have been trying to sit down with Muqtada for quite a long time, particularly, but certainly over the last year or two. But Muqtada has always refused to speak to them. Now, initially, when the first few years of the occupation, they weren't that interested in negotiating. Now they're very interested in negotiating, but Muqtada won't talk to them except about ending the occupation. As
you know very well, the official spin in the US is that the surge is a success and the US must eliminate what they call special groups, which is also code for Mahdi Army or Mahdi Army renegade commanders. Does this have any relationship or reality, or is it just propaganda?
You know, it reminds me of 2003 when Donald Rumsfeld and Paul Bremer were saying that the guerrillas who are attacking, the insurgents who are attacking the US Army were just remnants of Saddam Hussein's regime. I think that it's the same type of propaganda. Violence went down towards the end of last year, and then from January it's been getting worse and worse in Baghdad. We've been having more and more big bombs, suicide bombs. I mean, there was one.
It's practically certain that the Sadrists will win the October provisional elections. What happened next?
Well, if we have them, I mean, one of the explanations for the attack on Basra is that Nouri al-Maliki, who represents a small party, Dawa, doesn't have much support, and his main allies, the Supreme Council, the al-Hakim family, know what will happen in the October elections unless they can get tight military control of southern Iraq. You know, if you control a city, you can probably control which way the vote's going to go. Muqtada, from his point of view, really hasn't wanted a direct military confrontation either with the Americans or his Shia rivals backed by the Americans since we had the big siege of Najaf in 2004. His main interest is political, to win politically. Now, Maliki, I think, will try again. But it's evident that he can't do it militarily unless he's fully backed and his campaign is organized and controlled by the US Army. And the result of this is, and I don't think this is quite understood outside Iraq, is that the US is entering a second round in the war in Iraq. The first round was really with the Sunni community. That's where the insurgents came from. Now the US is entering a second round, which is against a very large section of the Shia community.